back in 1993. Back then I was, and I had this girlfriend that was about 22, and one of the kind of quirky things about her, she had this old Volkswagen Rabbit that she had painted really weird.
Yeah.
Just as a kind of an artistic.
Yeah.
Thing, and at any rate, we were getting ready to take a road trip. I live in Northern California, and we were going to take a road trip like coast to coast and back, but we were going to do it in my car, and it was going to be like towards the end of the summer. So earlier in the summer, she was going to be working up in Alaska, and I was just kind of waiting for the trip to start in August.
Yeah.
And so while I was waiting, I painted my car.
Uh-huh.
Just in preparation for the trip and just kind of goofing around. And so anyway, on my car, I had painted, it was a Honda CRX, and on, it mostly had a dark background, but then on the right side, I had like a farm scene, and on the left side, I had kind of like extending in the sky over the farm, then across the hood and onto the driver's side. I had pictures of UFOs coming in for a landing.
Yeah.
And then on the farm side, if you looked really closely, you see like there was like an alien driving the tractor.
Okay, yeah.
So I just goofing around, okay?
Yeah.
And then you know how people, you see those bumper stickers that say honk if you know the secret?
Yeah.
Or, I mean honk if or how's my driving is when you.
Yeah.
So I was getting ready for the trip. First I was going to write how's my driving, and then just have our phone number. But then I thought, like, well, I started to write, how's my driving? But then I thought, like, well, I'll do one of those honk.
Yeah.
So, well, honk if you know the secret. Okay?
Yeah.
And so I'm just goofing around.
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so as it turns out, the girlfriend bailed out on the trip, and I went on the trip myself.
Uh-huh.
And on the way back, I was coming through Wyoming, and I picked up a guy that was hitchhiking, and it turns out he was from Hungary.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And we get going down the road, and we stop at a rest area, and now he gets a good look at my car.
Yeah.
And he sees the flying saucers, and he's like, oh, UFO? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, you believe? And I'm like, sure. And he's like, oh, he goes, well, I'll tell you, the rest of my story. So he had just come over from Hungary, and he was just, trying to get a foothold in America.
Right.
And he said he had, seen Western movies, and so he was just kind of got a Greyhound as far west as he can go.
Yeah.
Looking for a job, basically. And I enjoyed his company, and so I was, said, well, I'm going all the way out to California. You can come along, and he's just thinking about it, and so then he sees the UFOs, and he goes like, well, now I'll tell you the rest of my story. And he goes, about 2 years earlier in Hungary, he says he's in his bed at night, and some space creature comes to him that's like about 9 feet tall, and kind of covered in like brown fur, and it's kind of hovering. And he says the space creature communicated with him, and he said there was in the forehead of the space creature there was like a hologram of the Hungarian guy.
Of himself?
Of himself.
Yeah, okay.
His name is Laurent. And anyway, the space creature basically tells him, go to Fillmore, Utah, and find the sacred book.
Serious?
And that's what he says. Basically, the space creature said that to him several times. Go to Fillmore, Utah, and find the sacred book. And it sounded like, what do you know about that? And he's like, I don't know. And he goes, as a matter of fact, he goes, I haven't even been able to find Fillmore on a map. And I looked on my map, and a pretty good map, but it didn't have Fillmore.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we get into Utah and stop at the rest area and see the great big state map. Sure enough, there is a Fillmore.
Uh-huh.
And so I had time and everything, so let's go down to Fillmore. and we got down there in the middle of the night and camped out. And in the morning, he's like looking around. He's like, well, this looks really familiar. He goes, I really have like a sense of deja vu. And as a matter of fact, he like showed me he had goosebumps.
Yeah.
Because he really, was feeling it so strongly. And we hiked around a little bit, and there's like a camping area about 6 or 7 miles east of town.
Uh-huh.
It's a real primitive,
right,
like a picnic area. But anyway, we hiked around back there, and we saw on like a trailhead marker, there was, just a such and such trail this way. But then there was like the Forest Service had carved in like kind of a stylized Indian kind of stick man, and it kind of like reminded us of like the kind of dimensions of the creature that had come to him.
Ah.
And so we're like, well, that's kind of odd, and well, anyway, we decided to go into town, and he's totally having deja vu, in the daylight.
Uh-huh.
The ridges. We decided we go to the Forest Service. Laurent was saying, like, I really think, maybe I lived here in a previous life or something.
Uh-huh.
Maybe there's a museum here of, like, artifacts.
Yeah.
Well, we got into town and we saw a Forest Service or BLM office, I forget which.
Probably Forest Service.
And I thought, well, let's ask them, if there's a museum or what have you. And so anyway, we walk in there, and mainly, the first thing I said, well, what's the significance? Why do they put that stick man on their sign?
Uh-huh.
That's, I think, the first thing I asked her about. And the lady's like, well, there's like a lot of hieroglyphics in the mountains around Utah, and, I'm not sure, why they put that symbol, but if you boys are interested in it, here's a brochure. She hands us the brochure for archaeology in southern Utah, and on the cover of the brochure is a figure that's exactly like the guy that came to him in Hungary.
Oh, really?
On the cover of the brochure, there's like this tall, like, would be about 9 foot hovering brown creature. And the thing that's really amazing is, like, 2 days earlier when I met the guy,
uh-huh,
he drew a picture.
Oh, really?
He drew a picture, and then when we get to Fillmore, I held his picture next to the thing on the brochure, and it was almost identical.
That is amazing.
And we were like, wow, that really, when we saw the brochure, we just looked at each other, and it was like, oh my God, what did we stumble into?
Yeah.
And so then, so I told the lady, this is really funny, because there I was with my funny painted cup.
Yeah.
I told the lady, well, this guy's from Hungary, and the reason we're in Fillmore is because this space creature, what looks just like the guy in your brochure, said, come to Fillmore and find the sacred books.
Uh-huh.
I'm like ready for them to lock me in.
Yeah.
And she says, oh, well, if you're interested in that, there's this old man in town, Del Allgood.
Yeah.
And he's way into it. And she went in the back room and pulled out handwritten notebooks from like the last, I want to say maybe even going back to the 30s, but maybe it was more recent than that. But of different people who had looked for the plates.
Yeah.
And over there in the Forest Service office, they had like all these old notebooks of guys that had gone digging in the mine and everything, looking for the plates and all the different mishaps that they ran into.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And just like first-hand accounts of like when those guys died and everything.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And right in their handwriting.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, in fact, they got a lot of their stuff from me.
Yeah. Oh, did they?
Yeah, Bill Wright down there did.
Yeah. So anyway, we looked at all that, and the guy from Hungary didn't have the greatest English, but I was trying to communicate with him what I was reading. And anyway, she sent us over to Del Allgood, and we spent the day with him, and he took us up on the mountain and showed us around, and told much of what I think your website has to say.
Yep.
And
he was an interesting character, old Del was.
Oh my God, I was really with the accomplishments what he did with his life.
Yeah, he was an amazing artist. He was.
Yeah. And so anyway, it's that's the bulk of the whole story. Is just that this guy from Hungary out of nowhere he wasn't a Mormon or anything.
Right. That did
Some bizarre creature from some other dimension or space or what have you says go to Fillmore and find the sacred books.
That is strange. Did the
so
symbols mean anything to him, or
Pardon me?
did he recognize the symbols? Did they mean anything to him, or?
Well, you know what? When we were up on the mountain, by the mine, he was like, oh, this is very, very familiar, and he kept on saying like these views and these vistas. He's seen them like in a dream, and this was another kind of a weird thing. He picked up a stone from the ground there, and then he pulled a little pouch out of his pocket and compared the stones, and they were different.
Yeah.
And he says, oh, this stone in the pouch, he claims fell from the sky like a year ago or something. And he claimed it totally came from the sky, and he hung on to it.
Yeah.
And anyway, he gave me the stone. He said that he picked up, and he said, this is to remember this by.
Huh.
And so then I come home, and I tell my friends all about my weird experience.
Yeah.
I had that stone with some other stones I purchased on the trip. And the first day back, I had purchased a brand new pair of pants, and I wore them to work. And I came home, I took the pants off, put them on the floor. And about 3 days later, I went to wear those pants again, and the stone was now in the pocket. And I really don't think I put it there.
Yeah.
So it was really kind of like, I don't know if that, that's kind of of less significance, but and this is the other thing that was kind of weird. He had a dream when we were in Fillmore.
Yeah.
We were there for a few nights, and he had a dream where he said that, in the beginning, like the people that came to populate the earth were like refugees from some like battle of good and evil.
Right.
He goes, and the earth was called Mu, which I guess is an ancient name.
Mu, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes Mu or Mo. He wasn't sure.
M-U. Yeah. I think they pronounce it Mu.
He had like a drawing. He made some drawings of like the different types of pyramids. Like the pointy ones and the square ones. And he says, I'm not sure what this is about. He goes, I think it has to do with a map of where, places are, or something to that effect. And then he went on and he said, in his dream, he said that if he and I went to Mexico and found the wise man in Mexico.
The white man, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And if we find the gold plates in Mexico, he looks at me, he goes, next Messiah. And I'm like, what? And I was like, we're trying to, this translation thing, and he's like, yeah. He goes, and I'm like, oh, I'm like, look, I got to go home.
Yeah.
I got a job to go.
Yeah.
And he goes like, oh, yeah, I know. He goes, it's just a dream. And I'm like, yeah, well, I'm glad you realize that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But at any rate, it's just so bizarre that somehow he got contacted.
That is weird.
About, these plates in Fillmore.
That is weird. Yep.
I was just curious if you had any other information or, overlap with, like these big brown guys from outer space.
That's the first time I've ever heard something like that.
Yeah.
I've heard the connection that some people think these are part of the sacred symbols of Mu. I've heard that connection. Of course, the only place where they really say that they have to deal with a sacred book is that site there in Fillmore, and that's what Jose Davila translated them to be. Whether he was right in his translation or not, is anybody's guess.
Yeah.
But I have had, I don't know, in '93, it probably would have been in Del Algood. Did he have that one rock in his
backyard?
In his backyard?
Yeah.
That M with the eye that used to have the red handprint over it?
Yeah.
I've had people tell me that looks like a spaceship to them.
Uh-huh.
More than one. I've had several people tell me that. And so that's really
He said that's Moroni's signature.
Yeah, he says that was Moroni's signature that's what Jose Davila interpreted it to be. Yeah. But I've had, that's a Mormon thing. That was Jose Davila's thing. Whether it is or not, who knows. But I've had people tell me that no, that's a spaceship.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah.
That's the only space story that I know that has to deal with these is that some people look at that and say, no, that's a spaceship.
So what's the thinking as far as how old these inscriptions are?
Mid to late 1800s. That's the earliest it can be. It has to be. We've got verification of that, but other than that, I'd like to get documentation of older, but I haven't come up with it. I've got hearsay saying that the Spaniards seen one of the sites in New Mexico in the 1700s and stuff like that, but I really can't track it down. A lot of people are saying no, it's modern, it's a hoax, because of the house with the window with the pitched roof. They say no, that's a modern thing. But if you go to like the Four Corners and Chaco Canyon and all that and see the houses that they built there, they had windows and they had some amazing houses, but they never had the pitched roofs. But they had the hot seasons there. They never needed a pitched roof. Father Escalante, when he came through Utah in the high Uintas up here, he says there was ancient stone buildings that was leveled, but they were ancient ruins. You could hardly even see they were still there when he came through in 1776. That was in the high Uintas where they had a lot of snow. They had to have pitched roof. There was no way they could have made a flat roof and had it survived. And they was ancient looking ruin to Father Escalante in 1776. So I don't know that I buy that theory. Then they say the horse and the cow, is a modern symbol. So the theory is that some Mormons went through in the 1800s and fabricated these to go along with their religion, but there never was somebody in the 1800s traveled a long distance. These are in the Western United States. Somebody in the Western United States traveled a long distance, which would have been a hardship on horseback, in rough territory where you got hostile Indians and robbers and stuff like that, to inscribe these for a hoax that never happened. There never was a hoax. You got years later in the 60s, Jose Davila seeing them ones in Fillmore and saying that it was Book of Mormon stuff, but that's it. That's him in the 60s. That's his interpretations. That has nothing to do with the original who put these there. There never was a hoax to this.
So this Jose Davila, he actually did find a different site in Mexico that yielded gold plates.
Well, when I visited him there, he was working in the digs in Tulum, and he deciphered some. Jose Davila was Mayan, and he deciphered some of the symbols there in one of the Mayan temples. That there was some plates there under the altar in one of the temples there at Tulum, and he was working on digging them and to see whether he found anything. I think if he had found something, we'd have heard anything. But so I don't think he found anything. But he was looking. Yeah. It's quite a mystery. It is a mystery, and they think it's modern. In fact, a lot of people thought Jose did it until they found a photograph taken in 1925 by Frank Beckwith, who was a National Geographic photographer. Then after that, they knew Jose didn't do it, but until then, they thought he did.
It sounded like, why would he make these symbols, and then, if he knew it was a hoax because he did it, why would he spend the next however many years and effort?
Well, they figured he was bilking a lot of people out of money to do this, but but the bottom line is he got money out of this, all right. But every dime he got, he put into digging this tunnel, and even all his own money. He lived dirt poor, and he spent everything he had, and he did get donations from people, but he spent it all on digging this tunnel to try and find these records. But they can say is he built people out of money. But that's just because. People did give him money, but he put it all back into, he really believed what his interpretation was. He really believed it, Del
Alligat also said that part of the thing, there were like some, at some point, some people from South Korea or something.
Yeah, the Hmong people, they came and they left a board there in that tunnel that's near them symbols.
Place ready.
What's that?
The board says we beat you to it.
Basically, it just says, this is the language of our ancients, or let's see, what did it say? I got a copy of it somewhere.
Yeah.
I got a picture of the board and everything. It said, in fact, I held the board. I know the guy that has that now. It just basically says that, this is our ancient language of our ancients, and if anybody wants to know more about the gold plates that were here, come to Laos and, find them. So,
do you think there's anything to that?
Well, we tracked down the Laos, that ancient language.
Yeah.
And what happened was they had that ancient language, but then whoever, the Koreans or whoever came and conquered them, made them change their language, destroyed all their history. Basically, a Cortez and Aztec deal, destroyed all their history so that they could convert them to their way of thinking, their religion, and all that. But back in the 50s, I believe, this guy had 2 sons, and they both died, and then they came and visited him in a dream and taught him this language back, in his dream. So this ancient language was brought back through, supernatural means.
Yeah.
And we tried tracking that down, and it just came to a dead end. Didn't get anywhere with it.
Yeah.
So couldn't really find the symbols that matched, and either they wouldn't talk about it, or there just wasn't enough information. But it ended up being a dead end. So
yeah.
So who knows where that ended up.
Yeah,
so.
I'll tell you, I was, obviously when I was out there in '93, the internet didn't really exist.
Oh yeah.
And so I told my friends a story, and at one point I wrote it down, maybe about 50 pages or so, and but life goes on.
Yeah.
You forget about it, but then I was, now the internet comes along, and I thought I loved just trying to find people that I've had connections to.
Oh yeah.
And I just typed in Del Allgood, and next thing you know, your website, and which is very much had a lot to do with those experiences. So I thought,
yeah.
my, the information is catching up with.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah. So the Hungarian guy. So there's a couple more people that were involved. It's we went. So we showed up in Fillmore in the middle of the night, slept out. The next day we come into town and Forest Service, Del Allgood, and then it was the next night, I think is when he had his dream, and the next day, I was pretty much getting ready to head home, and he was trying to decide if he should stay there and try to find a job in Fillmore, so we decided to go to Del Allgood, since he, had spent the whole day with us the day before.
Right.
And so we went there to ask him, if he can get a job for this guy. And there was another, turns out there was a couple there that, they seemed like kind of retired people that were kind of like ex-Mormons, but, not officially in the church, but still held a lot of the beliefs.
Right.
And their thing was they kind of drive around in their RV every day by wherever the spirit moves them.
Oh, uh-huh.
And they encounter people, and their thing was it's almost the end of the world.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
They happened to be at Del Allgood.
Uh-huh.
And they latched onto this whole thing with the guy from Hungary.
Uh-huh.
And my bumper sticker, honk if you know the secret.
Yeah.
And the gold plates, and they're like, oh my God, this is it. And they, and of course they were their whole thing, they were 90 miles away the night before. Where do you think we should go, honey? Well, let's take a drive through Fillmore. And they encountered us.
Huh, that is weird.
And so, what ended up is, Del Allgood offered Laurent, he said, you can live in my trailer and work around the art shop, and I'll feed you, and I'll also help you get a job in town. And meanwhile, the retired people, they were they brought them up to Salt Lake and let them live in their trailer in their backyard.
Ah.
And let's see. And so eventually, he kind of vanished. Maybe about a year or so later, I got a call from the retired couple, and
right.
They were like, "Have you heard from Laurent?" And I'm like, "Nope. It had been quite some time." And they're like, "Neither have we. He just kind of vanished. We can't find him."
Huh.
And they had brought him around to like this Native American medicine man,
Mm-hmm.
and they claim everybody said, oh, this Hungarian guy, he's like has special powers, and he's like kind of like a prophet or something. So these guys, the end of the world people were really, really
Excited about him.
excited about it. And but then he vanished, and I have not been able to find him on the internet.
And his name was Laurent.
Laurent Farsang.
Huh. And did he say he was just told to go to Fillmore and get the plates was all? He wasn't given directions or nothing?
No,
or
he said go. As a matter of fact, he said Fillmore. Fillmore. And, because it was, a little...
Right, with the accent,
Fillmore. And I'm thinking, Fillmore? No. Fillmore. And, I said, oh, sure enough, there is, we finally saw on the great big state map, because it wasn't on my AAA map, but finally on the great big state map, we saw, oh, there is a Fillmore.
Huh.
And,
man, I think if somebody would have told me to go to Fillmore and I was from a different country and I find that in that state, I think, and there was a story about it, I think I'd have stayed there and looked for him.
Well, yeah, I don't know how long he stayed in Fillmore or not. I think it was kind of briefly, but then he went up to Salt Lake because I think there was more of a job opportunity.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, it definitely would have been in Salt Lake than Fillmore, yeah. Definitely.
The Doomsday people were pretty, kind of zealous with their beliefs.
Yeah.
Probably kind of prevailed upon him to go, with them.
Yeah.
But it was just when we saw that brochure with, the last thing I was going to say about he drew the picture of the floating nice brown creature.
Uh-huh.
The picture he drew for me only had one arm.
Yeah.
And, it kind of looks like you'd almost picture like a ghost.
Right.
Right? But the picture he drew in the car, for some reason, only happened to have one arm. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is the brochure did not even mention Fillmore as being one of the sites.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It said, it said something like archaeology in southern Utah. We look at the brochure from the Forest Service, and there's actually 3 images of the same type of creature.
Right.
2 of the 3 only had one arm.
You're kidding.
No. And
I'm going to have to go down and see what that brochure looks like. You got me curious now.
Yeah.
There's like I say, there's 23 sites of these around the western United States, and that Fillmore site has the most history to it than any of the others.
Huh.
Fillmore has the most. And I don't know if it's because Jose started something, or even before Jose there.
Yeah.
There was a lot to do with that area.
How have other people encountered it, or found out about it?
I don't know. A lot of, I've got one story where it was found in the 30s, I believe, by some people, and they figured it was Aztec, Montezuma's treasure, Aztec stuff, and so they had a big story of what they did, and
so they were just traveling through the mountains and stumbled upon it.
Yeah, that's basically how it was. And in fact, that's kind of how I found them. When I went there, I'd found a site in Provo.
Yeah.
And then I'd heard that there was a site in Fillmore, but I didn't know where it was. And so I'm just driving to Fillmore. I'm going to find these things because I want to see if they're really like the things I found or not.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah.
So I'm driving, and I just pick a canyon. I drive up this canyon, and I see a pyramid-shaped rock. It's small, but it's just shining like a mirror at me.
Uh-huh.
And so I stop my car, and I hike up there. And what had happened was the face of this rock had been cut so that there was just a thin layer of quartz on this. The whole face of this rock was a thin layer of quartz, so when the sun hit it, it shined like a mirror.
Yeah.
Well, I thought, well, that's kind of weird. So I just started looking around from there, and up over the hill I went just a little ways, and there I found them symbols. Then there was a road there, so I thought, I wondered where this goes. I could have drove up here instead of hiking up this mountain I did.
Yeah.
So I followed the road down, and there was a sign, Fillmore petroglyphs.
Oh, yeah.
And then I thought, well, I wonder, if anybody knows anything about these, because I hadn't heard the story of Jose or anything yet.
Yeah.
And so I drive to the other end of town, and there's that rock shop, and I thought, well, if anybody knows anything about this town, it's going to be this guy with all these rocks in his yard. He's been up in the mountains. So I stopped, and that's Dell Allgood, and he gave me an earful.
I bet.
He was an interesting person, Dell was. So.
Do you happen to have a photograph of the front of his house? Where
you know what? I just took one just a little bit ago.
He built that huge flower.
Yep.
No, there was one other thing about the site itself that you didn't mention in your website that Dell, was part of, showed me as part of the tour. And as you're approaching where the mine itself, maybe I want to say
the map rock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. There's a lot of things I didn't mention, and
all I can say is my experience with this, the Hungarian.
That's definitely an interesting story.
There's another dimension out there.
Yeah.
That's very much happening that we rush up against sometimes.
Yep.
And it is gotta be far stranger than anything we can imagine.
Yeah. You know what? I did have another lady tell me that she was there in Fillmore, and she was there with another lady, an older lady.
Yeah.
And she was climbing up on that rock there in Fillmore, and all of a sudden that lady started screaming, telling her, get down now.
Yeah.
And then she said she fell, and that lady kind of caught her, but she says it kind of felt like, she didn't really, I can't remember if she really said she was pushed or whatnot, but she did fell just right after that lady started screaming to get down, and this older lady told her that there was ghosts or something there pushing her. Wow. Pushed her off that rock.
Yeah.
This older lady seen it, and she started screaming for her to get down just, because she seen them starting to push on her.
Yeah.
And then it was just right after that she fell. So that was an interesting story. So maybe there's something to it. Who knows?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I said, my bumper sticker, honk if you know the.
Yeah.
It's like, honk.
Interesting. Well, I'm glad I called you, because that is definitely an interesting story. What's that?
What's your name, Terry?
Terry Carter.
Yeah, Terry.
I might even put your story on my internet if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, cool. Good talking to you. And,
yeah.
I'll be watching for my email.
Okay. Thanks. Appreciate you talking to me. Bye.